Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Resilient Show. I am really excited today to be talking about something I'm very passionate about, and that's healthcare. We have been under just complete, I think, misinformation for so long in America, and American people's health has been put at risk, primarily for profit over actually care through big pharmaceutical industries and lobbyists and people in D.C. that we've elected to represent us that have not had our best interests in mind. And one of our the best voices that I've heard out there speaking on this is Brigham Buhler. He's the founder of Ways to Well, and we have him here with us today. Yeah. So awesome to have you here, bro.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, you're a fellow Texan, and you just drove in.
I know, it was easy, right down the road. Yes. And what's crazy is I grew up in this area.
Really?
So to see how much it's changed is nuts.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up out in Spring, Tomball area.
Okay, yeah, we're right here.
Yeah.
Yep. So, outside of founding Ways to Well, like you've been the owner of Revive. Well, you're still the owner of Revive Pharmacy, and that's like a compound pharmacy facility.
It is. And all the companies that I have started just from being in the broken system. All I tried to do each time was fix a problem, and then it's like every rock you look under is another rattlesnake.
Yeah.
So everywhere I lift up a rock, there's another rattlesnake. And I'm like, okay, well, let's figure out how to de-head this rattlesnake, cut the head off the snake. And that's all I've been doing over and over again for the last 20 years, I feel like.
Well, you started off in the snake pit. Right?
Yeah.
You started off in pharmaceutical sales.
Correct. Right out of college, bright-eyed, bushy-tail, went to University of Houston here in Houston, Texas. And was recruited to be a drug rep at 20 years old. And so I launched Cialis. We were talking about Viagra before the show, but I actually launched the competitor to Viagra. And so that was fun for a little bit. But then at some point I got shifted to where I had to carry the antidepressants and the antipsychotics and a lot of the really darker, deeper running medications. So that pivoted for me, and it changed my lens on the whole pharmaceutical machine.
Right. We were talking about that before the show because this is 25 years ago.
Yeah.
They're launching drugs like Prozac and saying it's gonna cure depression.
Yep. Yeah. We were told depression is a thing of the past. These antidepressants are going to solve depression. And the things we're told from the get-go, out of the gates, were not truthful. Right. That it's a chemical imbalance and that these SSRIs are going to solve depression. And we were just saying right before this, 25 years later, from the cure of depression being launched, deaths of despair at an all-time high, depression at an all-time high, anxiety at an all-time high. Our men and women in uniform are dying at a breakneck speed. 20 plus military folks commit suicide a day on average. Mm-hmm. We definitely have not cured depression or even put a dent in it.
The problem's got worse, but the pharmaceutical companies have gotten richer.
Correct.
Billions of dollars.
Billions and billions and billions of dollars. And even now, 25 years later, even the big pharmaceutical companies' retrospective studies have shown that these antidepressants barely differentiated from placebo. And it is wild to think, because I remember going to training on Prozac and raising my hand and asking the doctor, well, wait a second. I want to say Prozac was like 52% of patients had a positive response, but placebo was like 46% of patients had a positive response. Even the studies show that just walking outside in nature is almost double the efficacy of taking an antidepressant. It's definitely not the solution we were told it was going to be. And yet people are suffering every day with looking for hope and looking for answers.
Because people that are dealing with actual depression are looking for hope. So they'll grab on any promise that they're told.
They are. And it's that's where I'm such a big proponent for things like psychedelics, which is almost a 4-letter word, like we were saying before. And that's where, compounds like Ibogaine, the state of Texas, just announced this week. It's passed the Senate and the House. Mm-hmm. It's a $50 million initiative to attempt to treat PTSD and depression using Ibogaine. It's pretty groundbreaking, and supposedly Abbott's going to sign it in the next couple weeks. So,
but my personal opinion on that is that I wish they would use the word Ibogaine and not psychedelics. I think the word psychedelics has been like one of the most harmful things in pushing this. It caught me at first. At first, when I attributed the word psychedelics to recreational side, like the THC thing, right? Like medical marijuana, and you'd hear people joking in the background. Yeah, I have what is it for medical marijuana? The people.
Glaucoma.
Yeah,
everyone says they have glaucoma.
Yeah, so they could get high, and so I kind of attributed to that. I'm like, man, my kind of token line in response to it was like, yeah, alcohol makes you feel better when you have depression, but doesn't mean become alcoholic. And so I was one of the people that really pushed against it. However, on this show, I've had tons of people that have come through and talked about Ibogaine in one-time treatment, quitting alcohol. Like, and I come to realize that that Ibogaine, and I'm not advocating for it.
Yeah.
I know you are. I'm not, because I don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that I've heard firsthand testimony after firsthand testimony of people's lives being changed positively in a one-time treatment, not a recreational use, and it's actually conducted not with some shaman hippie in a tent.
Yeah.
Like it's a medical, a supervised medical procedure.
And 100%. And that's what I tell people too. The issue isn't the arrow, it's the archer, right? And the wrong tool, a great tool in the wrong hands is a deadly weapon. And, these life-changing plant medicines like Ibogaine have been around Ibogaine was used on the plains of Africa 8,000 years ago by Aborigines, and they used it to help their population. And if you look at the studies now, they're pretty mind-bending. I mean, there's nothing out there. I know Brian Hubbard, who's become a friend. He just went on Rogan with former Governor Perry, where they talked about the study that Dr. Nolan did out of Stanford. And they took 30 military veterans who were suffering from PTSD, anxiety. A lot of these veterans were given opioids because of their injuries during their military service. And what you see so if you take a step back, anyone who's been on opioids, it takes about 18 months for their brain to chemically recover from the opioid addiction. 18 months of non-use for your brain to chemically recover. We don't understand the mechanism of action or how, but one treatment of Ibogaine within 48 hours was able to do what it takes 18 months of recovery of non-use to do. So in one weekend, you can help these individuals. And out of 30 military veterans who went through this treatment in Mexico under doctor supervision, to your credit, that is a problem. Like, Ibogaine has a cardiovascular risk profile. And so you would never want to take it from some shaman on the streets or the internet.
Which was my impression at first. That's how it was presented to me at first. So of course I'm going to push back because I care about the safety of people.
100%. And it can be a dangerous compound in the wrong hands, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. Right. And it is not a fun experience. You are going to go through
That's what I've heard.
But so it's not this party drug or anything like that. But what happens on the back end of that for the brain, for the heart, for this, like for your spirit, call it a soul, whatever you want. It is life-changing for these people. 87% of the veterans came out a year later and said that their PTSD hadn't come back. And then out of those folks who get a second treatment, the folks who didn't get the results they wanted after a second treatment was a 97% success rate.
That's crazy. I mean, you can't argue that.
Versus antidepressants, where they're going to keep selling you hope for years. And most of the patients who go on antidepressants, even in these placebo-controlled trials, what we've seen retrospectively is it barely differentiated from placebo. So not just what I saw in the Prozac trials when I was a 20-year-old kid, what we've now seen retrospectively 25 years later in Big Pharma's own studies is it doesn't really differentiate from placebo. So why would we put somebody on a compound that increases risk of suicidal ideation, increases risk of depression enhancing in the early stages, and messes with the chemicals in our brain when there's other alternatives? And of course, talk to your doctor, go out and meet with medical professionals, but there are alternatives coming.
Well, you're talking about 300%. Like when Brigham says that you go in for depression and they give you antidepressant. These antidepressants, from what I have read, increase the ideations of suicide by 300%.
Correct.
That's
And we would get taught, how do you debunk that?
Yeah.
And this is the dark side of when I moved from selling Cialis.
As a sales guy, you're trying
Correct.
to debunk that.
So I sold Cialis. You go in and you're Elvis Presley, man. Everyone's high-fiving you. You've got the new ED med that lasts 36 hours. So my initial stint as a big pharma rep was fun. I was a 20-something-year-old kid. I had a $25,000 a month expense account in Waco, Texas, taking doctors to lunches and dinners and educating them on this new blockbuster drug. But after that, once the launch of Cialis was over, I got moved to antidepressants, and within 12 months, I was gone. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the job. You would go in and they would educate you. So this is where it gets a little sinister and how the big pharma plays the game. And I'm just telling you what I experienced. I'm telling you, hand to God, the truth. Eli Lilly is who I worked for. And these big pharmaceutical companies would tell you do all these training modules that are like, I won't promote off-label. I agree that we're never going to talk about anything off-label. And then you go to a dinner where it's sponsored by the company, where they bring in a doctor, and all that doctor does is talk about how they're using the product off-label. And they're telling clinicians where they're having success off-label with these products. And then you're put back into the field under immense pressure to go sell a product and hit a quota and hit a number. And you're going, do I tell this doctor what the other guy told me he's doing? It's off-label. And I'll be honest, a lot of reps are going to promote off-label. That's just what's going to happen. It's not going to be in writing. It's not going to be in an email, but the company says, don't do this, wink, wink, nod, nod. But then the training and everything that backs it gears you to put you in a position to promote the product off-label. Like one example I'll give you is there was an antipsychotic, Symbyax, launched into the marketplace. And it was indicated for basically bipolarism and manic states. And that's an extreme case, right? That's something that should be abundantly clear if you're manic or bipolar.
Right.
And one of the things that I watched happen in big pharma is they would go out and downplay that patient population, because your goal is to grow the amount of prescriptions in that region. How do you do that? You sell more medicines. How do you sell more medicines? You grow the patient population. How do you grow the patient population? People were going in and saying, Doc, I want you to think of that wife that says she can't sleep at night, so she gets up and she's cleaning the house at 1 a.m. And maybe she's sending emails and doing all of her work at night because she just can't sleep. That may be your Symbyax patient. That's 90% of people.
Right.
How many of us get stressed and don't sleep at night? How many of us wake up and we have anxiety about things that are going on in our lives, and so we can't sleep and we decide, let's just get some work done? I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. That was now being pigeonholed as a patient demographic for a very serious medication, an antipsychotic. And that is what I saw time and time again was they say one thing, they do another thing. You take an online module that you do with no reinforcement versus you go to a lecture and a happy hour where you're getting educated on a whole array of things that none of them are what's on the label or indication of that medication.
What are some things aside from that you've seen while you were in sales that just pushed you over the edge? Like, this is unethical. I don't care how much money I make. Like, I can't be part of this.
Well, you see a lot in med device. When I was a surgical rep, I saw some crazy stuff. Everyone talks about big pharma, and big pharma is crazy, but what a lot of people don't understand is surgery is no safer. So people think and they assume that anything that is used in the operating room or that went through the FDA approval process is safe. And oftentimes that's just not the case. So over 90% of the treatment modalities or implants in the operating room never went through a human safety study. People go, what? What do you mean? They're implanting products in our bodies that have never had a human safety study? There's a process called the 510K approval process, which is a loophole that was established in the 80s to allow technologies to come into the operating room faster. And like everything, industry got a hold of that loophole and massaged it and created this huge tsunami of gateway to enter drugs and treatments into the marketplace that come through the 510K approval process. So today, 90% of the stuff in the operating room came in through that process, which means there was never a human safety study. So I saw hips getting implanted that had to be removed because the hip started squeaking after 3-4 months of being in that patient. You saw mesh inserted into the operating room for women that ended up causing emergency hysterectomies where these women will never have children because they had to come in and take out their uterus from absorbing the mesh. Time and time again, there's just been catastrophic consequences to these loopholes. You see it even in the opioid crisis. You know, we now know that Purdue Pharma lobbied the FDA, took the head of the FDA to a private hotel where they spent 2 weeks with the head of the FDA who approved Purdue Pharma's OxyContin into the marketplace.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the full story, but do you know 18 months later, the head of the FDA went to go work for Purdue Pharma, the very company that they gave the golden ticket to. They put in their label less likely to be addictive. But there was never a study that showed it was less likely to be addictive. In fact, Oxy was 8 times more addictive than hydrocodone. So the previous system was the cotton system, which is just a layered delivery mechanism. And the reason that's important is Purdue Pharma lobbied the FDA and said, Oxy's really, really addictive, but our state-of-the-art delivery system prevents the ability to be abused and addictive, which is not true because if you grind up the pill, you circumvent the delivery mechanism. And the FDA pushes through, says less likely to be addicted, and they created and perpetuated the opioid crisis.
Yes, which is still dealing with today.
To this day.
Yeah. There's a movie that was out on, you see this?
Yeah, Dope Sick was a series on Netflix that gets into this, that breaks down.
So revealing.
Yeah. And the same message that I was given as a drug rep.
Right.
We are going to stop depression. Depression is a disease state of the past. And you really are told all the right things. And they bring in these world-class clinicians that educate you. And you believe it. You really do believe it. We're tribal by nature, and you want to believe you're doing well in the world. But for me, it didn't take more than, I think, 12 to 18 months of being in the antidepressant space. I immediately started looking for a job and saying, man, I can't do this. And I went from that to med device and saw firsthand that whole racket.
Right. You talked about, I was listening to Joe Rogan, you talked about not just big pharma and the issues that happen in the surgical areas, but you talked about one of the biggest culprits is the insurance
100%
companies. Explain that.
This is huge. I'm so glad you asked this. So let's go back to the opioid crisis.
Right.
30% of the revenue generated from the opioid crisis was made, held, and profiteered by the insurance companies themselves. So what a lot of people don't understand is your insurance companies, United, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, 5 insurance companies control 90+% of the healthcare in America. Those insurance companies went out and bought what was historically a middleman that Trump's been talking about, the pharmacy benefit manager, the PBM. PBMs were established in the 80s to drive down our cost of prescription drug care, to make medicines affordable for our grandparents and us. You know, they were a consumer advocate who was supposed to fight on our behalf. Well, at some point, those got acquired by the insurance companies. And rather than negotiating down the cost of prescription drugs, they negotiated up. And you go, well, wait a second, that makes no sense. Why would they negotiate up the cost? Because they went to Big Pharma and said, if you want to be on this insurance plan, you're going to give us a rebate on insulin. You're going to give us a rebate on all these things. And they hold the rebate at the middleman company, the PBM. So it's a kickback. We'd call it a kickback in any other industry. It's a pay-to-play model. And so the big pharmaceutical companies come in and go, we'll give you 30% of the profit of this drug if you'll put it on your formulary tier 1, right? And now that it's tier 1, it's going to be prioritized on your insurance plan, and accessibility to patients skyrockets. But the problem with that is you've now aligned the insurance companies to monetize and profiteer off of chronic disease.
Wow.
Not to prevent chronic disease. So jump back and look at the system and go, how did United Healthcare do over $300 billion in revenue, right? If you take the big five insurance companies versus the big five pharmaceutical companies, they've done almost double the revenue of the big five pharmaceutical companies. So big insurance is the 800-pound gorilla that somehow evaded the public eye,
right?
Who are monetizing and profiteering off chronic disease. That's why the average American's now on 4 or more prescription drugs. If I'm an insurer, why would I not want to prevent diabetes?
Right.
Rather than letting you progress to diabetes where you're going to be on insulin, where I know your cost of care is an 8-fold increase for the rest of your life.
Well, it's if you're paying it seems like the insurance company would want you less sick in the long run, so they want to heal you. They'd want to heal you and not make you worse.
Well, that's the misnomer. And here's why. So to break it down, a lot of people don't realize your employer is really who's paying for your health plan. You and your health insurance out-of-pocket expenses combined with your employer cover most of your care until you reach the age where you become the government's problem, when you're Medicare, Medicaid. And that's when most catastrophic events occur. So the big expenditures on our health plans happen after the age in our 60s, after we've already pivoted away from private pay and we're no longer insured by our employer. So their goal is to monetize as much of the chronic disease as possible during their tenure. And they've even changed it. I try to explain to people, a very simple way to put this is you've got to view your health insurance like you do car insurance. Mm-hmm. It's there if you wreck the car, if you total the car. If you're expecting your car insurance to rotate the tires, change the oil, be proactive and preventative, you are going to be sorely disappointed when you blow your motor out and realize that they weren't changing the oil the whole time. They're not there. They've even changed it from health insurance. If you look at most of those insurance plans, what they call themselves is managed care. It's your managed care plan because they are managing your chronic disease. They're not preventing your chronic disease. They're not treating your chronic disease. They're managing the chronic disease state. And most of the medications you're on are revenue generators for those insurance companies. So
through the rebates.
Kickbacks,
yeah.
And so roughly there's varying statistics because it's all hidden. The other thing I say is the margins are made in the mystery. When people say it's really confusing, I don't understand my insurance, that's by design.
Right.
Because their margins are made by keeping you confused. And so you don't know what's covered one month versus the next month. And then 1 month your copay goes up on a drug. And then the next month it goes down on a drug. All that is the PBMs just moving levers to maximize revenue and quarterly earnings.
So they're making money off of you while you're, I don't want to say healthy, but in your younger years, and then hand off the broken problem to the taxpayer system.
Boom, you got it. And then and I can prove this. The state of Ohio did a forensic audit. They could not understand why are mom and pop privately held pharmacies going out of business when our prescription drug cost is through the roof. This makes no sense. So they do an audit. They find $250 million in fraud. Let's call it what it is. Mm-hmm. It was coined as gap pricing, where the PBMs were buying and reselling the medications at a rate that were costing the government $250 million more than if they just would have bought it directly. And so the state cut out the pharmacy benefit managers and said, we're going to bring it all in-house and do it ourselves at the state level, which indirectly saves them almost $250 million a year. That's one state, not even a bigger state.
Right.
Multiply that times all 50 states and the patient population of the United States, and you begin to see how United, Cigna, and Aetna have made this kind of revenue.
You say PBMs a couple of times with what's
the
that
pharmacy benefit managers. The PBMs are the big insurance companies. Okay. So even Trump keeps saying these middlemen, these PBMs, I don't know who they are, but they're making lots of money.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. They are making lots of money, but they're not really middlemen. They are the insurance companies. They've bought them. I explain it like Scooby-Doo, where you're trying to solve the mystery, and then at the end they're like, it was Mr. Rogers the whole time. Yeah. If we pull back that ghost mask, it's going to be United, Cigna, Aetna, CVS, Caremark. Blue Cross Blue Shield, they have bought the PBMs. They are the PBMs.
So you have the PBMs, you have Big Pharma, big insurance, the PBMs, and you have the surgical centers. I mean, it feels like everything's stacked against the everyday Americans. I mean, for where it's profit over health. So certainly we could have some representatives go in Washington D.C. and represent us, right? I mean, but that's not the case. The lobbying.
That's the hope. Yeah, and that's what you're
hope,
trying.
Right? People would fight for us, but that hasn't historically been the case.
No.
How's the corruption in D.C. and local, state and local? How's that corruption make this worse?
Oh, I can tell you even firsthand at the state level. Senate Bill 25, SB 25, Senator Colhurst submitted a bill. It's in line with the MAHA movement and what Secretary Kennedy and so many of these folks have been fighting for. All the bill said, Chad, was if you're going to put a banned substance in food in the state of Texas, we want you to put it on the label. We're not even telling you can't put poisons in food. We're literally saying put it on the label, disclose that there is an ingredient that is banned in other nations being put on the shelves here in the fine state of Texas.
Seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
Fair.
It passed the Senate, I think 32-0 or like in favor.
Right.
Made it to the House. 22 amendments to the bill in the House. You had Buc-ee's lobbying. You had Walmart lobbying. You had Big Chemical lobbying. It was me and a girl named Grace Price, who's like a consumer advocate, 19-year-old kid who cured a lot of her ailments through her diet and lifestyle and cutting out ultra-processed foods. Us two basically testifying against 15 lobbyists from all these various industries. And they were wanting to remove atrazine from the bill. They were wanting to remove glyphosate from the bill. All of these known endocrine disruptors, cancer cause. And to get the bill through and get these labels done in the state of Texas, you had to accept these amendments. And so indirectly, it hinders the bill.
And
did we still
lobbying,
get a bill through? We did, but is the bill what it originally was? Did it have
No.
the teeth that it originally had? No.
And but when you say lobbying, that means someone's getting paid
100%.
by a for-profit company that has a vested interest in this. They're paying off someone to make these amendments. That's what lobbying is.
100%. And we saw it. We had congressmen and congresswomen that we had met with behind closed doors that all said, I'm going to support the bill. Then the day before, I get messages saying, oh my God, I'm at the Capitol here in Texas, and these lobbyists have gotten the ear of all of these congressmen and congresswomen, and they're terrified, right? These are the people that fund their campaigns. I was told, do not go against HEB. Brigham, don't shit on HEB. They are a juggernaut in this state. And HEB was part of this lobby. I'm sorry, man. I'm not a politician. I'm not here to hide.
Yeah.
Like HEB and Buc-ee's, places that I love growing up
I love
in
those
Texas,
places.
have supported the lobby to hide what's in our food, to hide from people what is in our food. And Big Chemical and Big Ag partnered together to lobby to remove atrazine and glyphosate from the bill. And then the food lobbyists lobbied to delay the labeling for 2 more years. And so that's just here at the state level. Then you go to the federal level. And right before we testified at the Senate, a senator said, whatever you guys do, just don't attack Fruit Loops. I love Fruit Loops. And we're like, we're here just to tell the truth. It's not that we're attacking anything. I just want to show you if there's banned substances, banned ingredients in other countries, known endocrine disruptors, and we're facing a chronic disease crisis in America. I know you're a military veteran, and we've talked a lot about our military personnel and the history of the United States. We have lost more people last year alone to chronic disease than every American life lost in every war combined.
Our food system's compromised. You can't, I travel all over the world. I've been to like 60 something countries or so. And I don't eat bread in America, period. But when I travel overseas, especially in Europe or Eastern Europe, I eat bread, and it doesn't affect me at all. I mean, that's just one example.
Yeah.
But
No, you're spot on. I had a famous kickboxer, Ben, come in from UK, and he's like, "Mate, can I get any food here?" Like, he was reading the labels at our grocery stores and was shocked at like all the extra stuff that's in our food. And I was trying to explain, and this is where it gets so complicated because I get it. The other bill that I testified against was we were attempting to remove Coke from the food stamp program in the state of Texas, move soft drinks, because 60% of our state budget of food stamps go to soft drinks, which is not a food source.
No, there's no nutritional value.
It's no nutritional value. And I was trying to explain to this congressman, because again, the food lobby gets a hold of these guys and they attempted to turn it into a race issue. Like, this is racist to not give these, and what this individual didn't know is I grew up in a foster family in Texas. I'm fully aware of our foster system and what happens to these children. And you're taking children who are already at a financial disadvantage, at a family disadvantage, and you're not even giving them a chance to get out of the gates. One of their cornerstones of their diet is going to be to give them Coke and soft drinks from an early age. And we know that Coke and all of these drinks are more addictive and oftentimes than some of the most addictive drugs on the market. And then I was explaining, because a lot of people don't understand this, the difference between a healthy person and a chronically ill person on the cusp of losing a limb is literally a teaspoon of sugar in the bloodstream at a time. That's it. That's the difference between being healthy and chronically diabetic and at risk. There are 8 to 12 teaspoons in every single soft drink that is on the market. Unless it's a diet or, but traditional Coke has, I think, 8. Sprite has 8 to 12, like all of these.
But then
we're giving that to a child.
And then the diets and the zeros are loaded with other chemicals. And
what
blows me away is a product like, name one. I don't want to. I probably couldn't name one, but Fruit Loops, for example, we just met the ingredients in Fruit Loops in the United States versus Canada versus Europe. The ingredients are different.
Yeah. We testified this at the federal level. And it's funny because that senator was like, don't pick on Fruit Loops. I love them. And then that was the one we pulled out. And my friend Vonnie Hari, I don't know if you've ever met Vonnie.
I have not.
She pulled out Canadian Fruit Loops, held the bag next to American Fruit Loops. And the American Fruit Loops, I'm not going to lie, it's beautiful. It's shiny, bright, vibrant colors. Canadian Fruit Loops are more dull colors, but it's because they have to use natural dyes in Canada. They're not allowed to use the dyes that but here's the craziest shit of all. We manufacture those Fruit Loops, Kellogg's, in the same factory. They ship one set to Canada, a different set to the American people. And their smoke screen on all this stuff at the state and federal level is, if you make us change these ingredients, the cost of food will go up. And I had one of the congressmen who was trying to say, I come from a minority community in Beaumont, and if you do this, my people won't be able to afford these foods, and this is going to be too cost prohibitive, and I don't need the price of eggs going up any more than they already have. And I said, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I want to explain something to you because you've been misled. Ultra-processed foods have a 60% profit margin. Eggs have a 10 to 15% profit margin. Eggs have one ingredient. Fucking eggs.
Yeah, eggs.
The price of eggs aren't going to go up because there is no label change. This is industry colluding and trying to misrepresent the fact. They have a 60% profit margin on these ultra-processed food ingredients. And all we're asking them to do is to disclose what is in the food that they're selling the American people.
You're not even telling them to change it.
No.
Yeah.
And that has been a dogfight. And so you were asking me before we went on air, how optimistic am I? It all depends on how impassioned and focused the American people are. Because the biggest impact to all of this is honestly guys like you. It's podcasts. It's the day Joe Rogan had me on and I talked about PBMs, it set off a nuclear bomb to now where the president of the United States is. And that's how I met RFK. I met Bobby Kennedy because somebody from his staff had heard my Rogan podcast where I broke down PBMs, and they said RFK is going to be in Dallas. do you want to meet him? Would you like to come sit down? I said, I would love to. And this is when he was the presidential candidate. And I drove from Austin, Texas to Dallas, and he rolled up his sleeves and sat down with me for 30 minutes, grilling me. What PBM, explain to me, how are they making the money? Well, wait a second. How do they make the money if they're the insurance company? And then I had to explain, because all of those bills get passed on to the employer. So we've talked a little bit, you alluded to that my company's between Ways to Well and my pharmacy Revive, I employ 500 plus people. Okay, every year I have to meet with the insurance companies where they break down the cost of care to insure my employees. And they're going to say, Brigham, Joe Bob was on an antidepressant that cost us $500 a month. And Susie was on a weight loss drug, a GLP-1 that cost us $1,300 a month. That's $20,000 a year, basically, for these employees. We've got to make our money. We're going to mark your copay, your deductible, and your expenses on your employees up. So at the end of the year, that cost gets passed on to me, the employer.
Right.
I'm paying for that, and you, the employee, are paying for that. The insurance companies never pay the dollar amount they're showing us on the balance sheet. They pay a fraction of that because the rebate's held at the pharmacy benefit manager middleman companies that are them. And so I was breaking all that down for RFK, and that's how I met Bobby Kennedy, and then he invited me on his podcast, and that's how I kind of got pulled in a weird way into the Maha stuff.
I definitely think he's the best person for the job through the Secretary of Health and Human Services. This is his whole life's work has been this. So you spending time with him, kind of behind the scenes, is he the real deal?
He's the real deal. I was telling you right before we went on air, there was an issue going on with the FDA, and I had sent his team a message, and I thought, his chief of staff and Stephanie and RFK have been unbelievable. And I thought, well, how will it change once he's elected and he's in power? And I know he's really busy, and I reached out to them about an issue, and literally within a few hours, Bobby called me, RFK called me and said, what is the issue? And I explained it, and he said, lay it out in an email, send it to me. Within a day, he had forwarded it to the FDA and asked for them to sit down and talk to me about the challenges. And you and I talked before we came on air too, like I'm a proponent for psychedelics in utilization in a clinical setting, under the right supervision, with the right checks and balances, as a treatment modality for depression, anxiety, and PTSD. There's phenomenal data there. We're both huge proponents for stem cells, stem cell research, and biologics, and how much these biologics can change the trajectory of somebody's life physically and give them the ability to heal and recover in a way that their body just can't without it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, peptides and preventative care. And RFK is a supporter of all these things. Unfortunately, historically, the FDA has not been at all. In fact, they've done the opposite and almost declared war on this entire sector of preventative care, of psychedelic use, of stem cells, peptides, any of it.
So I was just in Washington, D.C., and I was Congressman Derek Van Orden, Eli Crane, and Morgan Luttrell invited me to testify on alternative treatments for mental health for veterans with PTSD, and it's mainly focused on the suicide epidemic. And as I was testifying, it came out that and this is from the VA reps that were testifying as well, any treatment for mental health for veterans through the Veterans Administration has to be approved by the FDA. So, to me, immediately, it's a very much a conflict of interest. Why would the FDA, one government organization, have to approve for another organization, and that only allows for clinical care? Am I wrong in that?
No, you're spot on. And that in my challenge with the FDA is, if we historically look at the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they were asleep at the wheel on food. Okay, they let all these generally accepted as safe chemicals be put in our food. Well, who did the analytics on generally accepted as safe? Industry, self-regulated, and did their own studies. And so if we even go back to like a basic thing like a food dye, right? Like red dye, whatever, red dye 40. Okay, they're basing it off their analytics, off an adult human. off somebody eating the dosage that's put in the food. Who eats the amount of Cheetos that's on the bag? Nobody. Yeah. And what about a child who's eating 20 of these things in a day? I'm no argument ultra-processed foods are bad. Like that's bad alone, but all the chemicals aren't good either. They let all that come into the marketplace. Then you go to the opioid crisis. They created and perpetuated the opioid crisis. Most of FDA's funding comes from Big Pharma. That's one of the problems. I think it's 49% or something of their funding. It's staggering, whatever it is. I'm blanking out, but it's a huge chunk of the revenue that funds the machine comes from industry itself. And those relationships have a ton of cross-pollination. 12 out of the last 14 heads of the FDA have gone to work for industry. So if I'm going to take a job in Big Pharma 18 months down the road, the last thing I want to do is implement a program that allows accessibility to a treatment like Ibogaine that overnight eliminates the need for all antidepressants if it is half as efficacious as it appears to be in the preliminary studies.
So why would the VA forfeit that authority over to the FDA?
A lot of that, I don't even want to go insidious. I think a lot of it is just incompetence.
Okay.
Like there's a level of bureaucracy in the machine, and the VA probably says, we're not the ones that regulate and decide what treatments are safe. Why don't we let the FDA tell us? And then it's easy to say no. You never get in trouble saying no. Like attorneys will say no if they can get away with it 10 out of 10 times because they're never going to put you in harm's way.
Yeah.
But we also don't innovate, cure, or help anybody if the answer is an obstructionist mindset. And so on one side of the aisle with the FDA, they open the floodgates and allow industry to walk through the door with all these treatments that have never had a human safety. And this is where I call bullshit. Right. And again, let me be clear. This is prior to Secretary Kennedy and Marty Makary taking over the FDA. And I've gotten to meet Dr. Makary. He testified with me at the Senate level. I know for sure he's a good human and that RFK are good people and that they have the best of intentions. But they have inherited a ball of yarn that is going to be very difficult to unwind.
As things tangled up.
And it is very tangled and very messy. Like even my meeting with the FDA, when I flew in to meet with them, there were 6 people in there just taking notes. And I was asking questions about backlogs in the United States on GLP-1s, as for an example. And I'm covering a lot of ground here, but it's to try and explain it. One of the things I brought up was, how did you, the FDA, decide that GLP-1s are off the backlog? Their answer? Well, Eli Lilly told us that they can meet the needs of the American people.
A pharmaceutical company.
The company that has the most to gain by selling GLP-1s.
Right.
That's one of their blockbuster drugs. So Novo and Lilly are the 2 big players. And I said, okay, well, if we look at the data itself in the United States, we had a pharmacy advocacy group that called 30,000 pharmacies a month for 12 months. Less than 6% of patients could have filled their prescription. Wow. So again, I ask you, how can you trust industry to self-regulate? Because time and time again, what we've learned is you don't let the person who has the most to gain, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome.
Yes.
Like we cannot let industry self-regulate. And I go back to, if they're doing that with a simple product like a GLP-1 that is obviously still on a backlogs list, why would Lilly and all these companies want to shut down compounders' ability to make it and meet the need of the American people? Because it shuts down competition.
Yeah.
So if they're doing that on that compound and you look at the other parts of their bag that make billions, antidepressants, antipsychotics, diabetes medications, think of the catastrophic effect to the pharmaceutical industry if we really do practice the ways to well approach to medicine, if we really do get proactive, predictive, and preventative. Because 80+% of chronic diseases are preventable through diet, lifestyle, and intervention, not a drug.
So someone's going to suffer. Either pharmaceutical companies are going to suffer financially, or the American people are going to suffer through the cost of their health. And
I'm not saying that it's a level of, if your best exit from public service is to go work for the very industry that you regulate, And a huge chunk of those folks go to work for the industry that they're regulating. There's so much spit being swapped. It jades the lens. Yeah. And now you've got this lobbyist from Big Pharma that takes you out to dinner once a week and invites you to these happy hours. And that's where you're spending your time. And with AI, like we use AI at Ways to Well. And I explain to people, AI and large language models are only as good as the input. If you have bad input, you'll have bad output because it's going to act upon bad information.
Right.
The FDA has been built upon bad input. It has a moat around it that doesn't allow, ingenuity and creativity and fresh lenses. Even the system to get a drug to market is rigged. You aren't getting a drug to market for less than $250 million. Okay. Who can afford that? Big Pharma. So
yeah.
When Big Pharma says they're innovating, what a lot of people don't realize, I'll go back to the GLP-1s. Most of those drugs are paid for by taxpayer dollars. We, the people, are funding innovation, not Big Pharma. We, the people. So in the last 15 years, there's 200-something blockbuster drugs. Out of the 200-something I think it's like 270 what are considered blockbuster drugs. Out of those, how many do you think Big Pharma innovated versus taxpayers? The answer is 2. 2 out of 200-something drugs in the last 15 plus years have come from Big Pharma. The rest were all funded by taxpayer dollars, at which point those molecules are purchased or acquired by Big Pharma for pennies on the dollar through a licensing agreement. And then they bring it to market, and then they collude with the PBMs, and then we pay 10x, 20x what other nations are paying. Like the GLP-1 weight loss drug is $140 in India right now.
So we paid for it with our taxpayer dollars to get developed, and they turn around and sell it back to us.
Boom.
Yeah.
And it gets so deep and dark. And you're asking, can we make a change? The answer is yes, but it's podcasters. It's guys like Joe and you and Sean Ryan and Tucker and people bringing light to this topic. Because I can tell you.
Well, that's why I'm so thankful for your voice in this. Because, there's so much misinformation out there. Everyone loved RFK until he jumped in his position. Now he's like, they're out. They're just trying to destroy his reputation. He's misinformation. He's a conspiracist. But all his only agenda is to bring healthcare back to America. That's the only agenda I see for him.
100%.
He has nothing to gain.
That's all I've seen too. Behind closed doors, he's the same guy he presents himself to be in the public eye. He's somebody who's fighting for truth, who's fighting for transparency, who's seen the broken system, the corruption, the collusion, and the corporate capture. Yeah. And it's all real. Yeah. It is all real. And I think our systems have been captured. That was my testimony in front of the Senate. That's where I really forged the relationship with the Maha movement was myself, Callie Means, Casey Means. So we all testified at the federal level. And at the time, other than RFK, nobody knew who the rest of us really were. And I don't remember which media outlet, but they called us the Woo Woo Caucus. One of the people who testified that day was Marty Makary, who's now the head of the FDA. One of the other people who testified that day was Casey Means, who's now nominated by President Trump to be our Attorney General for the United States. Callie Means, who's now a special government employee in the White House, reports directly to the Trump administration for healthcare. Vani Hari, the food babe, who has been preaching about food dyes for 15 years, and now within how long of Trump being elected, all these food dyes get added to the list and removed. So it's just, change is real.
Have you seen Joe Salatin?
I haven't.
He's like he's a farmer, the regenerative farmer guy. He was on Joe Rogan's.
Oh, I have seen him. Is he?
He's got a position in there. I'm not in the White House, but in food and agriculture.
I do know who you're talking about. I just didn't pick up on the name.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, amazing.
It's incredible
stuff.
to see guys like a farmer. He's he's out there in rubber boots and overalls going to DC because he's a farmer. I love seeing those kind of people in administration.
I do too, and I think I just can't underline enough you podcasts. Free media, it changed this election, and it changed, I think, the world and the way politics will be played out forever. because talking to RFK and Callie Means and these folks that are in the White House, like their feedback is the court of public opinion will drive policy. And if the people think politicians drive policy, people drive politicians that then drive policy.
But they have to be informed.
They do.
And you know, whether mainstream media is lost and corrupt or not, which I believe it is, but I'm on Fox News a lot. And when I'm on Fox News, I'm going on as an expert on a topic, and I maybe get 3 minutes to talk. And there's not much I can inform people in 3 minutes. But these podcasts allow us to really dive in with guys like you who are experts in these topics to inform the American people so they can vote accordingly and drive policy. And I think the which and you know, credit to Joe Rogan, he's been such a pioneer and created the opportunity to put these mediums out there. But like you said, Tucker, Sean, we have an amazing audience that supports this show. I mean, this is the way to get truth out, and so I'm thankful to be part of it.
It is, and like another real world example, the American Heart Association showed up at the Texas Senate to testify against removing soft drinks from food stamps.
Wow.
And they thought they could fly under the radar. Well, guess what? Joe Rogan caught wind of it and talked about it on the podcast. 2 days later, the American Heart Association redacted its objection to the bill and said that they had made a mistake. It was a mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake because the biggest supporters of the American Heart Association are Coca-Cola and Pepsi. So much when we go back to this layering, I'm not being conspiratorial. I'm just telling you the way it is. Like, this is the truth. I've seen it. I've watched it. Like, these people come out in droves and they're able to move chess pieces behind the scenes and get the ears of congressmen and congresswomen and our politicians. And it's podcasts that are now moving the needle more than any political movement because this gives the public the knowledge and the power to fight back and to call bullshit, to be able to say, no. I heard this guy on so-and-so or on Sean Ryan and he said XYZ, and they'll go do their own research. And an informed consumer is dangerous to industry.
Yes.
Because they can call it out and they're going to buy they're going to buy with their pocketbooks and vote with their pocketbooks, and that changes the world.
Yeah, I'm super proud that Smith & Wesson Firearms is a supporter of this show. I have been shooting Smith & Wesson Firearms since I was a kid. This is one of America's most patriotic companies that has been around 170 years. The Resilient Show is honored to partner with Smith & Wesson. I personally use Smith & Wesson Firearms every day for my everyday carry. I keep Smith & Wesson Firearms in my home for my home defense. When I'm out on the range practicing, it is a Smith & Wesson at the end of my grip. So check them out, and I hope you join me in carrying one of America's most iconic firearms. It does. Yeah, that's awesome. That's just, So I really want to get into ways to well and what you do now. But before we do, I want to close the loop on the Ibogaine because we touched on it. But I know we're sitting here, and a friend of mine, both Marcus and Morgan Luttrell. Morgan's the congressman where we're at right now, and he's been a big proponent for Ibogaine as well. And so what is happening? You were talking about a bill getting passed, and we touched on it, but what is actually happening in Texas right now?
So there is a bill that passed the House and the Senate. It's waiting on Governor Abbott's signature, and I believe all indications are that Abbott's going to sign it, and it would be revolutionary. The bill funds a $50 million research project for Ibogaine, which is going to allow us to see on a larger scale if the studies that Dr. Nolan and a lot of these thought leaders in the field have been doing have the merit we think they have. And it could be life-changing for accessibility for our military personnel here in the state of Texas, basically to allow compassionate use to be able to utilize plant medicines like Ibogaine to treat these PTSD, depression, anxiety, a lot of what's causing the loss of so many military lives after service. Yeah. Like we talked about earlier, I think it's on average 20 plus military personnel are committing suicide a day.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in a space for, a long time now, and went from 16 to 22 to, but the problem is, like you said, with the the pharmaceutical industry, the government grades their own report card. And the last report was 17 a day, but they took out jumps, overdoses, and car crashes, which a large percentage of that would be jumps, overdoses, especially when you're getting drugs just mailed to you in whatever amount you want, and driving a car into a tree or jumping off a building or all that stuff. So there's been independent reports that say it's up to, and there's been some university independent reports up to 50 a day. I don't know what the right number is, but one a day is too many. And if this treatment, the Ibogaine treatment, can help save a life, then I'm not opposed to it. Like I said, I originally came out opposed to it because it was presented to me very badly. And, plant medicines immediately sounds bad, but I mean, I would never, plant medicine could be cocaine, right? I would never be a cocaine addict, but I certainly, if I'm going about to get a toe amputated next week and I want some lidocaine in there, right? So these, medicines have a
so many of these medicines, like Ibogaine included, were listed as a Schedule 1, which means there's no medical use and this is banned. Right. So this is a movement that will hopefully the feds will follow and reclassify Ibogaine to open up the ability for more and more research, because all the research is being done outside the United States.
Yeah.
Ibogaine is being utilized in Canada, Mexico, Europe, for the very treatment that it's not allowed for in the U.S. Yeah. And so I think this will be a step in the right direction. It's a monumental step for Texas, and Texas is leading the way now on the MAHA movement as far as like SB 25, the bill that changed food labels, removing Coke and these ultra-processed foods from our food stamps, and now the psychedelic movement to allow accessibility to some of our most vulnerable patient populations. So all of it is like a step in the right direction, and none of it happens without podcasts. Like none of it.
Well, I mean, you talk about things being banned, and if I looked at all the things banned, and stem cell being one of them, we're going to talk about stem cell, but Ibogaine, all these things that are banned, I believe many of these things are banned intentionally by the pharmaceutical industry. Now we know big insurance, right? Industries. They're banned because they cost them money, because if these treatments were here, there would be more preventative care and not treatment. And so preventative care is so much on the favor of the people, where if you get rid of preventative care, now you got problems, and the medical industry makes more money. So preventative care is where you're at Ways to Well. So I want us to get into what made you transition. Why did you start Ways to Well? When did you start it? What was the journey to get Ways to Well up and running?
Yeah, you set it up perfectly, because one of the things that actually happened was I was a med device rep, and I had opened a pharmacy attempting to, so I lost my brother during the opioid crisis. So that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about drug abuse, opioids, alternatives, breaking the cycle of addiction. He was 27 years old. He got addicted to opioids after tearing an ACL. None of us knew that he was addicted, didn't have any addictive behaviors, had no clue. And when the government changed its stance on opioids and required triplicates, it got harder and harder for a lot of these opioid addicts to get accessibility to opioids. And so same thing you're talking about with the suicides of our military veterans. It's the same hidden number with the opioid abuse issue, because what's happening is they're not buying over-the-counter opioids anymore. They've turned to black market, and they're buying heroin and drugs coming in from Mexico and Canada, essentially. And those can be cut with fentanyl. Right here in the Woodlands, my brother passed away along with 7 other kids in a week time frame that all had met drugs cut with fentanyl that stopped all their hearts.
So sorry to hear that.
And during that time frame is when I was trying to get my pharmacy off the ground, and I was out educating clinicians on the importance of not writing opioids. I would say, look, we can compound a non-addictive, non-abusive pain cream for anyone coming out of your surgeries. And it's a topical that can't be extrapolated out, that can't be abused, that doesn't have any psychoactive effects. And insurance covered it. And within 18 months, insurance said, no, we're not going to cover it anymore. Put them back on opioids. So that was one. Then I'm out educating clinicians on the importance of getting proactive, predictive, and preventative, I bought a blood lab. And I say, if you're going to assess the overall health, doesn't it make sense to pull blood work and get comprehensive blood work on these individuals and do a deep dive to assess if there's a hormonal imbalance, a chemical imbalance, something else going on? It's one of the leading indicators. I can tell you where you're going to be and where you're going to feel based off your biomarkers. It's going to tell us in advance if you're headed towards a chronic disease, a heart attack, a stroke, all of these things. It is a cornerstone to getting proactive and predictive. Every clinician I met with in Texas said, absolutely, I love this idea. We roll it out. Chad, I'm not kidding you. Within 7 months, probably within 6 months, all of the clinicians in Texas got warning letters from the insurance companies saying, we don't like that you're pulling comprehensive blood work. If you keep pulling blood work like this, we will consider revoking your contract. If I'm a primary care in Texas and I lose Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm out of business. If I use United Healthcare, I'm out of business. So I built this blood lab. I had all these employees, 150 employees, and I had all my clinicians call me and say, Brigham, I don't want to pull blood work. I'm terrified of the insurance companies. I'm not going to do it anymore. And so at that point, my decision was shut down, lay off all my employees, or go cash pay. And this was 8 years ago, right? And so people are like, cash pay? You're going to get people to, and I tried to explain it. If you are in the insurance model, you are not getting the treatment that is best for you or your family member. You're not getting even an assessment of whether you're headed towards chronic disease, because everything is controlled by the insurance companies. They decide when, where, and how you get screened, what medicines you get, what treatment modalities are available to you and your family members. And those oftentimes are not what's best for you. It's what's best for the insurance company's pocketbook. The insurance company is going to put you on the medicine that has the highest rebate, not the medicine that's best for you.
Yeah.
And so if we take you out of that model and build a life raft, we can assess. You said before we hopped on about the VA, and a part of you wonders, is the only way to fix the VA and its health options to just start over? And that's literally what I saw in the healthcare establishment. There is no fixing it, because throughout every step of the process, somebody is bought, paid for, corrupted, and colluded, even if it's unintentionally. Most primary cares, the number one employer of primary, go back to the PBM, the pharmacy benefit manager.
Right.
Do you know who the number one employer in the state of Texas is of primary cares? Optum Health, which is a PBM. Do you know who owns Optum? United Healthcare. If you look down the line, one of the other major employers of clinicians in the state of Texas is Blue Cross Blue Shield, who I believe bought Kelsey Siebel. This is a conflict.
Yeah.
If your clinician is employed by the very insurance company and the pharmacy benefit manager middleman that then negotiates pricing, and I experienced all of this. So when I owned retail pharmacies, they would not pay me money on meds that I would ship out to patients. And then a month later, I'd get a knock on the door. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield. Hey, we hear it's tough out here for small, privately held pharmacies. We're actually in the market to buy pharmacies. Would you want to sell? And they put you out of business, then acquire you and roll you up under their umbrella. And now you're part of this captured system. And so this is the long way of saying I can't work within this framework. And that's where we built Ways to Well. And the premise of Ways to Well,
1930 is mafia.
it's insane.
Mafia.
And the premise of Ways to Well is very simple.
Yeah.
Through proactive predictive medicine, we can prevent the chronic diseases that are killing 1.7 million Americans a year. And the answer is not at the bottom of a fucking pill bottle. Mm-hmm. The answer is through getting proactive and predictive and understanding your health and driving health span. Because the difference between somebody who lives to be a centenarian and somebody who dies at the average human life expectancy is the onset of chronic disease. And we now know the average American is riddled with chronic disease. 4 or more prescription medications for the average. That's insane. We should not be on 4 or more prescription medicines. This system is not stopping chronic disease. It's perpetuating it and profiteering off of it. And so our model was, let's build a life raft. Through cash pay solutions, we can offer preventative, proactive care. And it starts with blood work.
That's what I say. But first thing, if you go to Ways to Well, first thing you do is get analysis, right?
Correct. And so like if one example would be, let's say you were to come into Ways to Well and say, I have anxiety, depression, and I can't sleep. Mm-hmm. If you were to come into a primary care practice, they're going to write you an antidepressant, a sleep aid, and maybe do a basic lipid panel, which doesn't look at enough to get a true assessment. Right. At Ways to Well, we would look at over 70 biomarkers. Depending on how bad your depression and anxiety is, we would most likely recommend doing a wave neuroscience EEG, which is a brain scan that allows us to use AI to assess your brain health. Is there any anomaly? Is there any misfiring neurons? Are these beta wave? And none of that leads to a prescription drug. It leads to an assessment that allows us to truly understand physiologically, is there something going on here? And then also, have you ever looked at family history? Do you really know what's going on? Do you know the genetics and epigenetics? Have you ever done an MTFHR test? Do we know if this person has this gene marker, which 40% of people do? And that gene marker means you can't metabolize certain vitamins and food sources. And not being able to metabolize those vitamins and food sources lead to a cascade effect of inflammation, brain inflammation, joint pain. A lot of people who think that they're suffering from rheumatoid arthritis actually just have the MTFHR gene. They call it the motherfucker gene. And it's a genetic trait that so many of us have.
Just certain symptoms mimic other illnesses. And it's not a flow chart of like, this is the symptom, this is the medication.
Yes.
Like that's what I feel like a doctor's very much. I mean, when I got put on high blood pressure medicine, which really affected, like when I say affected me, like I was really like, oh man, I eat probably cleaner than anyone to know my age. I work out like a monster. I'm completely healthy and I'm on blood pressure medicine. I was not okay with it. And I'm going to this cardiologist and he's just doing a check that he's just checking the box based off my blood pressure, which by the way, it always elevates every time I go into a doctor's office for some reason.
White coat syndrome.
Yeah, I get the white coat syndrome. And so I read this book by Saladino and I'm like, hey, what do you think about me trying the carnivore diet? And he's like, oh no, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, I've been eating no red meat, like high veggies and low sodium and nothing's changing. Like, what would it hurt to try it? And I'm looking at him. And he looks like he's about to die because he's so unhealthy. I'm like, why am I listening to this guy? So I switched to all red meat, cooked in butter. I dropped the vegetables and added a ton of sodium per day, and my blood pressure dropped. And,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, like, they're just. I mean, I don't want to say they're not educated because they go to medical school, but they just seem that there's no like independent thought.
But there's no nutritional training. That's what's crazy. For a primary care, they don't have any nutritional training. Casey Means talked about this at the Senate testimony. She's a Stanford-trained clinician, has never had a single hour of nutritional training in her medical training. And that was part of the...
That's intentional.
Yeah, it is because all of that training and all of our medical academia was originally, it goes back so far, but a lot of it was originally set up by like legacy establishments that were attempting to lead you down a pathway to prescribe first, right? Because there's so much money in prescription drug care. And so
nutritional education would lead to holistic care.
Boom. And that's my thing is like, you can't solve the chronic disease crisis without talking about diet, lifestyle, and nutrition. The GLP-1s. I've been on all these podcasts. We prescribe GLP-1s. We produce GLP-1s at our compounding pharmacy. And I am the first to say prescribing a GLP-1 without talking about diet, lifestyle, and nutrition is like brushing your teeth while eating Oreos. It's a total diminishing return. And most clinicians in America have 8 minutes on average with you because they're in the insurance model. If you come in there obese, diabetic, they're going to write you a diabetes medicine and they're probably going to put you on a GLP-1 to get the weight off. And I'm not saying that's the wrong move, but have you had a conversation about diet, lifestyle, nutrition? Have you talked about the importance of protein? Have you even talked about the importance of you're going to lose all your appetite? And if you don't
The
feed.
GLP-1 is like Ozempic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the weight loss drugs. Sorry. Yeah, that's good clarification. But so many people are now saying, oh, I've lost all my muscle mass, or there's Ozempic face, Ozempic butt, all these things. But all that comes down to the right tool in the wrong hand is still a deadly weapon.
Because you could do like Ozempic, but not lose the muscle if you have like the right nutrition.
You could microdose. You can that's why I'm a big proponent of compounding. So the pharmaceutical industry has a one size fits all approach because that's what they got FDA approval for. So everyone goes on these dosages and this is a one size fits all versus compounding. And you go, look, this person has X amount of lean muscle mass, X amount of fat. Let's microdose them on a GLP-1, twice a week, and let's optimize their protein, and we can get their blood sugar under control, help them lose the body fat, preserve lean muscle mass, and set them up for long-term success. Because if we can even put lean muscle mass on, now you're at a higher metabolic burn rate. Now you can eat more, and versus these people that take Ozempic and do a crash diet, it's basically chemical anorexia. And then, and then what happens?
Which is why they look Holocaust victims.
Exactly.
State, right?
And then now they come off it and they've lost a lot of lean muscle mass and then sometimes even bone mineral density because nobody's educated them on this is going to crash your appetite. And if you just put them on a generic one size fits all approach dosage. So it's just an example, but that is an example that explains the whole crux of the issue with the general healthcare system. There's buku dollars being made off GLP-1s.
Oh, yeah.
By the big pharmaceutical industry, by the insurance companies. Like in Europe, they're trying to say it's cheaper here because the PBMs are taking 30% of the profit in America. And they are. 30% of the GLP-1 profitability is going back in a form of a kickback to be on the insurance formulas. But at the end of the day, it's me and you and the taxpayers fitting the bill for this. And fitting the bill for, as employers, for our employees to be on these medications that we're getting price gouged on. And there's no predictive, preventative talk about diet, lifestyle, nutrition. There's no talk about let's get you off these ultra-processed foods. Let's find you clean protein sources. It's not rocket science. It's really not. But you got to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And our system's not built to do that.
So, your traditional doctor through insurance is going to be prescription first. Ways to well, cash pay options like as other companies out there are going to be panels first, figuring out what the problem is first, and then treatment. Or are you ever against medication? There is a time and place for medication.
No, I'm definitely not against medication. It's just right place, right time, and nuanced, right? I'm a huge proponent. I've talked about this a lot on podcast about hormone optimization, right? That's technically a medication.
Sure.
But as we age, there's a precipitous decline in our hormones. And that precipitous decline creates a cascade effect. And that cascade effect leads to all the other chronic diseases that begin to hit us. So if you're a 45-year-old male and your testosterone is chronically low and we're attempting to help dial you in, there's most likely going to be a prescription intervention implemented in your protocol, but we're going to monitor that. We're going to be thoughtful about that. We're going to, and I don't believe that it's our job. One of the things that I really disliked as a device rep and as a drug rep was almost the authoritarian position that clinicians often take where they're dictating to an individual what to do with their health. And at Wastewell, our goal is to enlighten, educate, and embolden patients to take sovereignty and autonomy over their health. So we're not here to tell you what to do and what not to do. We're here to give you the blueprint and say, okay, Chad, your cholesterol was great. Your blood pressure was high. Here are some strategies. Which pathway makes the most sense for you, right? And it doesn't have to be prescription drugs, but it's about having the time to do that conversation. So one example would be an average American with a primary care gets on average less than 8 minutes with their clinician. At Wastewell, we do a comprehensive blood panel over 70 biomarkers, and we spend 45 minutes on the phone with the patient, deep diving into everything that the AI algorithm uncovered. And then from there, that patient has the AI in their pocket 24/7. Alan, our AI bot. I don't know if you've seen it at all. But he's there to answer any questions. He can tie
Can you
into
talk more about the AI technology
Yeah.
and like when and how you integrated that? Because I seen it recently and I thought that's, I mean, the amount of the difference between sitting in front of one doctor and limited to their knowledge and their experience, their experience in medical school, their experience in the field, versus the AI data of like hundreds of doctors, hundreds of research papers coming in and bringing like a comprehensive solution to whatever problem. I think that's, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, that wasn't possible.
No, and it's the future. I really think in 5 years, I think 5 years, maybe someone can argue because the FDA, maybe it'll take 10 years. I think people will look back and go, that's crazy. You got in your car and you drove to a doctor and you had a full workup.
We were such cavemen.
Yeah, because the future is, and what we're viewing it, and we're already doing it, is Alan, our AI model, ties into your wearables. We monitor your REM sleep, your deep sleep, your heart rate variability. If you give us the accessibility, we know how many days a week you're exercising. We know how you're pushing yourself in your exercise routine. We're cross-referencing your epigenetics, your genetics, your prescriptions, what treatment modalities you're on, what chronic ailments you have, all of those combined. We're looking at your cytochrome P450, cytochrome P450 is each of our genetic makeup and how we vary in our metabolization of medications. And then we're customizing your treatments, customizing your prescription medicines unique to you, mailed to your doorstep. But then we know what date you started. So in a real world example is NAD. It's a great product. For a lot of people, they love it. I took NAD, but because of Alan, I saw my heart rate variability plummeted. My resting heart rate jumped by 10 beats per minute. My REM sleep was trash. My deep sleep was even bigger trash. And this isn't me trashing NAD. We've seen phenomenal
just for you
benefits in NAD for our patient. For me, for whatever reason, my body does not like NAD. And I literally felt it and then was able to reference it and quantify it using Alan and go, yeah, NAD is not for me. And how many patients may come in and say, oh, I got NAD from so-and-so and it didn't work for me. Well, now we can tell them, yeah, this isn't for you. Now multiply that times testosterone or anti-estrogens, or for women, they were all scared out of being on estrogen and hormones during the Women's Health Initiative. All of these are things that are really impactful. And if I can get wins on the board, like another person who's about to do a testimonial is Jelly Roll. I don't know if you know Jelly Roll, the singer.
Yeah.
He's down 180 pounds.
Wow.
He's down 140 pounds since coming to Ways to Well. He said, I want to shoot Bubba, I want to put you guys on the map. I want to shoot this video of all the things you've done for me. When somebody is fighting obesity and they're in the pit of despair, it's crucial to get wins on the board early. And one of the things we can do through algorithm-based medicine and quantifying results is show those results sooner.
Yeah.
Look, your heart rate variability over the last 3 weeks has improved. Look, your resting heart rate's improving. It's truly quantifying not just treatments where they're good and bad, but also improvements. And now it's another measuring stick. So imagine a world where I've assessed your brain health using an EEG and AI. I've put you through a DEXA. I know your lean muscle mass, your visceral fat, your subcutaneous fat. I know exactly how many calories you need to eat per day to maintain lean muscle and drop body fat. And then I give you an AI bot that's fun, friendly, personable, tied to some of the best and brightest minds in the world that is in your pocket 24/7 to answer any of your questions, pull from your charts, pull from the battery of tests we've put you through, explain it in a layman's way that you can understand. And you can even put him in unhinged mode where he'll cuss and talk to you like he's a buddy. Like David Goggins was kind of like the inspiration for it. But he's like, man, you're a wreck, fat ass. Let's look at your body fat. Your BMI was XYZ. And that DEXA will allow him to coach you.
You can tell by your heart rate if you're sitting on a couch.
Yeah, he can tell everything. But with all that knowledge is power. Yeah. And now you're driving your health journey. And where I was going with all that, to me, that's the future. It's not, I drove to my doctor, I got my blood work, and he tapped on my knee, and he looked in my ears with a light. That's 100-year-old medicine. We've been doing that same workup for 100 years. Yeah. Like the future is 24/7, knowing where you're at, knowing your baseline, and improving your baseline.
And when you talk about cash pay, I personally, this is my opinion, there's not a price you can put on feeling good and feeling healthy. Like I know a lot of people make this decision of like, I do that, but my insurance doesn't cover it. Like, so what? Like the amount of money you waste, the amount of things you waste money on, like spending money on your health is like in the way you feel. You can't put a price tag
just
on that.
to explain, comprehensive blood work in 45 minutes with a clinician, I think our price is $500. And we're doing a membership model to where somebody could break that out monthly. And the goal is to make this affordable for the average American. And that's where these large language models and AI are so crucial. Because as I can roll out more and more large language model driven analytics, I can drive down the cost of care.
Cut your overhead.
And my hope is I make this where it's literally $10 a month and we're monitoring you 24/7, staying on the cutting edge of everything to make sure we keep you dialed in. Yeah. I think RFK said it in front of the Senate. He said, a healthy man has a million desires, a sick man has but one.
Yeah.
Right?
Be healthy. That's easy. He just focus on whatever his medical problem is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, if we can prevent chronic disease, it's not that expensive. It really isn't. We're being sold a bad bill of goods. Like if you go get a comprehensive blood panel through your insurance, there's a high likelihood your insurance denies a portion of the coverage and makes you pay it out of pocket anyways,
right?
And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And that's why I started Ways to Well, is I kept seeing that. Like they would come in and do blood work and then the insurance would say, no, we're not covering it. They need to pay for it. We don't think there's medical necessity. And then your primary care is going, I don't want to piss off United Healthcare and argue with them because they'll cut my contract. I'm sorry. You just need to pay the bill. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's deep.
Well, I'm thankful for what you're doing. I mean, I've been doing cash pay type treatment for quite some time now. And unfortunately, in the position I'm in, I have a lot of people have taken care of me. One of those places, and I want to talk about this, is because I've been a lifelong athlete. I've been, jiu-jitsu, professional MMA, been banged up from being in special operations, jumping on airplanes and doing crazy stuff. And so I've had a lot of injuries, but I'm 49 years old. I'm going on 50 now. And man, I get on the mats and with the 20-year-olds, and I'll brag a little bit. I smash most of them most times. And the reason why is I've really focused on my health. And one of the things that has really in the last few years turned things around for me has been stem cell therapy. And I've mentioned to you, I'm on the board of a bioaccelerator. Eric Scoffers is like amazing human being. I introduced you guys in DC.
He's a great guy.
And so I really wouldn't want to get your take on stem cell therapy because and I even talked to you about this before because I want to be careful, because there's so many great people in the States that are offering stem cell that's helping people. So I want to be careful not to bash that. But what happens in the States and what's able to be offered in the States on stem cell therapy, to me, is much different overseas. In places like Bioaccelerator, they're based out of Scottsdale, Arizona, but the clinic's in Colombia. Mm-hmm. And so the best treatments have been pushed overseas. So I want to ask you, one, why? And I feel like I can speak in that a little bit too, why it's overseas. But two, what's the pathway to get these companies, or not these companies, because the companies are one thing, but the actual treatment and modalities here available to Americans in the States?
I'm optimistic. I can tell you that Secretary Kennedy has experienced firsthand the benefits of stem cell therapy and is a huge proponent. He even tweeted, I don't know if you saw, he had a tweet that said, FDA, I have a message for you. Pack your bags and save your records. The war on stem cells and peptides and compounding pharmacies is over. Pack your bags and save your records, which is that's a bold statement.
It is, yeah.
And it gives me a lot of hope and a lot of optimism. And I know the new head of the FDA, Marty Makary, is also a proponent of stem cells and the benefits and that they can offer the American people. I think a lot of what happened historically is what we've seen time and time again.
Yeah.
It's bad information in equals bad choices out. And our regulatory bodies like the FDA are corporately captured from these big pharmaceutical institutions. And those pharmaceutical institutions lean on and pressure the FDA on a lot of their sources. And there's so much cross-pollination that 20-something years ago, when a lot of the regulations and rules and regs that were put in place, they were under the impression that we were going to be aborting fetuses, using fetal cells and killing babies to harvest stem cells.
A lot of it was intentional misinformation.
100%. 100%. And the other thing they were concerned of was that these cells would differentiate and become cancer cells in the body, and we would have a plethora of cancer, an epidemic of cancer spreading throughout the nation if we didn't suppress and prevent these treatment modalities from coming into the marketplace. Candidly, we saw the same thing with testosterone. You know that they lobbied and fought testosterone to be preventative because they claimed it would cause prostate cancer.
Right.
And now we know, 70 years of retrospective data that testosterone actually insulates and prevents prostate cancer. It doesn't increase the risk of cancer. Yeah. And same thing with stem cells. So, Dr. Kaplan is who discovered MSCs in a Petri dish. And Dr. Kaplan came out in an open letter apology to the American people and to academia saying, hey, I feel like I did a disservice. Even though I discovered MSCs and how beneficial they are, some of what I thought they were damaged our accessibility in the United States because I thought they would differentiate and they could become a cancer cell. What we're seeing now is they do differentiate in a Petri dish, but they don't differentiate once put in the body. And so that's important because if they don't differentiate, that means they don't become something. And if they don't become something, it means they can't become cancer cells. And so if they can't become cancer cells or don't become cancer cells, that is a huge reason why they were suppressed in the United States and part of what the lobbying used to keep them out. That and the misnomer of you're going to have people, collecting abortions and aborting fetuses for this. Yeah. These aren't fetal cells.
No.
Most of what these facilities are using are birth-derived tissues. Umbilical cord derived cells. And so they're extrapolating out all of these cellular goodies and then expanding them in a Petri dish and then administering those to treat these injuries and illnesses.
And that expansion in a Petri dish is what's not allowed in the States, but available overseas.
Because in the United States at the time, again, this is during the Bush administration, they were worried that we would be cloning humans. And if you're cloning a human cell, a stem cell, is it cloning humans? And so a lot of the regulatory oversight and regs here are built around misinformation and misnomer. And so what BioAccelerator is doing, what a lot of these facilities outside the United States are doing that have become the gold standard is totally ethical, totally safe, no risk profile, astronomical benefits,
huge
phenomenal results.
I could talk about mine because, I had shoulders and wrists and elbows and neck. I had a broken neck, and I did a spinal tap for a TBI. And phenomenal results, like night and day from what I'd previously got here in the States. And I became just an instant believer. But from what I've seen in other people, we've sent, Eric is super generous and has taken care of about 10 special operations veterans that were wounded in combat for free. But one of these guys, not a special operator, a firefighter in California, and he had broken his neck and was paralyzed, paraplegic. He was literally like blowing the straw to drive his wheelchair and was told that was his life. And so somehow he got down to Columbia, went to BioAccelerator, and 3 trips. He wasn't walking again, but he went from blowing in that straw to pushing his wheelchair with his hands, getting rid of his colostomy bag, holding his little girl, shaking your hand, wiping his butt, like feeding himself, having his dignity back. And his name's Dustin. Just an incredible story. As soon as I seen that, I told Eric, like, I got to be part of this. And so I've been a part of it ever since. And that's why I was so excited to introduce you to him, because I'm like, you guys have to be working together. What you guys are doing here at Waste of Well is so incredible. What they're doing in Columbia is so incredible. And just from what I know about you, I've met you before, but Sarah Verardo, who's a, very dear friend of mine, and what she says about you, I'm like, and Eric's just such a great human. I'm like, you guys just have the same heart to help people.
I believe in BioAccelerator and what they're doing. And I've seen firsthand, like at Waste Well, we can't expand the cells, right? That's the big difference. We cannot expand and extrapolate out those cells, isolate them and expand them because we're here in the United States. But even what we do here in the United States is everything's off label. Right? It's an FDA gray area. I mean, I'll be honest, and it's a ticking time bomb. If RFK wouldn't have got elected, I don't even know how long we would be able to offer the treatments we're offering. I was exploring going outside the United States just to hedge against the FDA. Not literally out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people we have treated, I don't think we've even had a single adverse event. Like and I guarantee you, if you talk to BioAccelerator, they have probably had none to minimal adverse events. And even when we warn people, we're like, the adverse events as most common are fever-like effects, like flu-like effects. And we tell people 5% of people experience it. I've literally, I think, seen it once. Yeah. Like, it's so rare. And when you understand the mechanism of action and break it down in a way that people can understand, I think that they're a lot less intimidated by it. This isn't some out there, it's not going to go become a cancer and you're going to all of a sudden, it's just not the mechanism of action. And that's where even orthopedic surgeons, I don't think understand. I tell people, think of it like a construction site. As we age, there's a precipitous decline in all of the building blocks that allow our body to heal ourselves. That's why when your grandma falls, she may have a bruise for a year versus when you're a little kid, you can fall off the side of a mountain and you're good in a day.
Because she has stem cells too, but they're 70 years old.
You got it. Right? And she's missing all the building blocks, peptides included. All of these things have been put in this no man's land because the government, the FDA, candidly doesn't understand how they work. And even in the meeting I had with the FDA, one of the individuals in that room said, there's no clinical use for peptides. And I don't know how familiar you are with peptides, but I'm like, you do understand that.
Samorelin is what I do.
Yeah.
I think it's, yes.
You do understand that insulin's a peptide. You do understand that the GLP-1 is a peptide. Like, a peptide is a short chain amino acid found naturally in nature. It's stripped in our foods nowadays because very few foods are grass-fed, wild, free-range food sources. Everything we're eating is ultra-processed and preserved. And so our bodies are not getting the essential building blocks they used to have. And then as we age, there's a precipitous decline in all those building blocks. And what these cellular therapies do is allow your body to have all of the necessary building blocks and ingredients again. And so think of it like a construction site. You can't build the building if you don't have the bricks, the mortar, the wood, and the blueprint. And what companies are doing that use these cellular treatments are allowing your body to have those ingredients again, to have those elements. So we're putting back in the cytokines, the exosomes, the MSCs, mesenchymal signaling cells or stem cells, and all of the extracellular vesicles, but then also the messenger RNA cells that tell your cells you're young. Here's all the needed building blocks to build this construction site. Oh, and here's the blueprint. And allow your cells to heal yourself again the way you did when you were young. And so for a period of, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, you're healing like a young child again. And the body can do amazing things when we give it everything it needs to heal.
What would it take for RFK to do or to happen in DC for Waste Well to be able to provide the same kind of stem cell treatment that's being done overseas right now? What would have to change?
Just the FDA stance. The FDA stance and guidelines, I think, would have to be revamped. And I know that there's a big lobby and a lot of people pushing for it. With all of that, I'm curious, what is the counter lobby? How bad is it? And what I don't like about the counter lobby hides in the shadows. Right. I learned that even with food, HEB doesn't want me talking about them, like Bucky, they want to hide behind lay low and send their lobbyists out to move chess pieces without anyone knowing. And I don't know who's hiding in the darkness and fighting this stem cell movement. I can't fathom who it is because
the orthopedic industry would be impacted, right? The medical side of orthopedics. For example, I crashed skydiving last year and I was going to I had two people said, "Hey, you're gonna have to have ACL and MCL surgery," and I went down to Columbia and I didn't have surgery.
Yep.
Right, but so that was a a hospital would have made money off of that. An insurance company would have made a lot of money off of that, but they didn't. Medicine, right? They would have made a lot of money off of that, but they didn't. So I'm sure across the spectrum, they don't want that preventative or holistic health because that is, I think
you're spot on.
Healthcare.
Like I literally covered the Texas Medical Center for almost a decade with some of the best and brightest orthopedic surgeons, spine surgeons, all of it. They all trashed stem cells the entire time I was their rep. Can't get stem cells in the United States, not real. Even this stuff they're doing overseas is going to cause cancer. It's all dogma.
Right.
It's the same way a primary care still thought that testosterone caused prostate cancer. It's literally a study from Dr. Huggins in like 1930 something with a patient population of one man who was chemically castrated, and they put him on testosterone and his PSA went up. Well, yeah, you were chemically castrated. Of course your levels are going to go up.
They're going up,
and that created dogma that lasted 100 years, right? Until Dr. Morgenthaler debunked it in the late 90s. And he's like the godfather of testosterone. The same thing's going to happen with stem cells. These cellular therapies have been wrongfully convicted of a crime they didn't commit. Even the adverse events here in the United States were candidly improper storage and improper technique. Like I've said multiple times, a hammer in the wrong hands is deadly. So one of the issues that happened in the early days of stem cells is people were storing them on liquid nitrogen, but none of the containers had been validation tested for liquid nitrogen. So stem cells being preserved at cryo temperature to keep the viability of the cells, nitrogen was leaking into the vials at one of the clinics in Dallas, Texas, that was administering it in spines. And so they were injecting liquid nitrogen into people's spines.
Yeah.
And I think 8 or 9 people had catastrophic adverse events. There may have even been a death. I don't remember all the details, but that created a grassroots movement that allowed industry to hold up and go, look, this is what happens if you don't regulate stem cells. People are going to die.
It wasn't stem cells. It was liquid nitrogen.
100%.
Poor procedure.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's another thing that I talked to the head medical officer at BioX and she talked about the storage. Like one of the things that they're able to do overseas, they're not able to do here in the States is they actually have the lab and storage on site. So they don't even remove it from the storage until you're on the table.
Yep.
Where here it would be transported. The lab would be off site. It'd be transported and the viability, who knows?
Well, I can tell you, no, you're spot on. I would love for them to open the accessibility, but increase the regulation, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because right now, what's happening is they've created a black market where candidly, there's a lot of chiropractors and random people out there saying we're administering stem cells, but there's no viable cells. If they don't have a crazy cryo freezer and they're not shipping it on dry ice and then immediately moving it out and storing it at negative 180 degrees, you're just putting a bunch of cytokines and I mean, there's no viable tissue in there, but it doesn't mean that it won't increase. It will reduce inflammation. So there is a potential physiological response, but are you truly getting regenerative medicine? No, you're not. Not if that's the case. And I can tell you firsthand, when I was a device rep, an exorbitant amount of chiros and podiatrists and folks were using room temperature amnion and telling people I'm giving you stem cells and charging them insane
I'm really glad
money.
you're saying that because I haven't thought of that, and that's true. Like, make it accessible, but regulate for the true professionals, industry professionals, because the same thing happened with testosterone, right? You had chiropractors and everybody, you had physicians assistants, everybody in every corner in America is giving testosterone, but they're not doing the right blood work. They're not giving anti-estrogens to balance it out. They're just, and so now you had all these side effects and abuse, and just because they just let everybody started handling it out.
Yeah, there's always a need for checks and balances. But but again, like if you ask me what I think with STEM, I think we have the best shot we've ever had.
Yeah.
And I think the way we get it done is again, people like you, people like Joe, people with platforms that have voices, and our military to show. Like, one of the things that I'm trying to get done is the opportunity to roll out a pilot program with our military to show that this works. It's one of the things I'm working with Sarah, and we met with Doug Collins. We've met with several different military officials to say, I'll do it for free. You tell me a patient size and we'll make it happen. All I'm asking for is the right to treat these folks and to document it and to show you that this is real. And it's not so that Waste and Well can have a monopoly on this. Like, I want BioAccelerator here. I want all of these folks here because none of us could get to the patient population if we tried.
Exactly, yeah.
It's so big,
collective
and there's
effort
so
anyway.
many people, and this is such a life-changing treatment.
Yeah.
The more people we can get out there talking about it and talking to their friends and showing their friends and family the results they've gotten, the better. And there are good actors out there like your buddies and so many companies that I think are good players in the field.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of bad ones. That's unfortunate.
For sure.
thing.
Unfortunate. Yeah. I mean, look, it'd be amazing if you got in with Doug Collins and you guys are able to treat a kind of a test group because I highly believe that my buddy Colton Hill and I were just talking. I think it's kind of a newer nonprofit called Core Medical Group. And that's kind of one of their focuses is helping, I think, through companies like yours, get veterans get their hormones in balance because for their mental health. And I think just a major factor that the VA has overlooked.
Oh, 100%. And Doug said that. One of the things that he brought up in my meeting with him was there's this like gap where when you're active military, then you kind of, as you transition from active and you move to the VA, what they see is there's like a 3 to 4 year lag where you kind of fall out of the system. And then these military folks come back in chronically ill, like in dire straits because they were banged up, blown up, put through hell and back. And then their health falls off when they come out of service and nobody's really monitoring you to the level they were. And now you come in riddled with chronic disease, injuries, all sorts of issues, pre-diabetes. Yeah. If we can develop a transition plan as people leave active duty to stay proactive and predictive and transition them into society in a way where they have the support they need, physically and clinically, we could prevent all of that.
When you look at the patients at Ways to Well, what would you say the average patient, the average 50-year-old in America, I'm 49, versus someone who's on those protocols, the lifestyle difference, just like on a pragmatic level, the lifestyle difference in
it's night and day. Yeah. I'm 45. Yeah. Okay. Look at you. Look at Joe Rogan. Look at Cam Hanes.
I've seen Joe Rogan talk about this, and he pulled his T-shirt up and flex his bicep. That's like not a 55-year-old bicep. I'm guessing he's around 55. Yeah.
I mean, and it's all because you're optimized.
Yeah.
The same thing that we were talking about with these cellular treatments, there is a precipitous decline. And as we have that decline in our hormones, you're going to lose bone mineral density. You're going to lose lean muscle mass. You're going to put on body fat. You're going to put on subcutaneous fat. All of that leads to all of the cascade of chronic diseases versus a guy like you who's dialed in, and I also say wins lead to wins. Momentum leads to momentum. When you're in the pit of despair and you're morbidly obese and you're trying to climb out of that, you're hopeless. And you think, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine going from where Jelly Roll was to where he is? And now he's a different human. Now he's not walking, he's running, right? Now he's playing pickup basketball games. Now his goal is to get to your level, to get to Joe's level. He wants to put on muscle and lean muscle mass to preserve his body composition and protect himself for the future. And so I think it's night and day. Yeah. Like it is so, I was the opposite. When I was a device rep, how I uncovered mine was I was 35 or 36 and I literally was on the cusp of obesity. I was 25% body fat. I wasn't sleeping well. I was inflamed. I was pre-diabetes. I had high cholesterol. And I went in and they ran my blood work. And he said, has anyone ever looked at your blood work? And I said, not that I know of. And he said, your testosterone's 110.
Wow.
You have the testosterone of like my grandmother, is what he told me. And I'm like, oh, great. And then he's like, I don't know if you're fat because you have low testosterone or if you have low testosterone because you're fat. But you're definitely fat with low testosterone. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the pep talk. And that was how I started from myself, my personal journey as a patient. And I understand now, I was up at 4 a.m. I was in an operating room till dark. I never saw sunlight. I was living off coffee and nicotine. I mean, that was how I got through the day. And I didn't eat right. I didn't eat the right calories. And you just get caught in a cycle and you think, well, I'm getting older and I work a lot. So that's just how life is.
Yeah, exactly.
And dialing in my hormones and being proactive and predictive has not only changed my life, it's saved my life.
So life didn't have to be that way. Like this is what we're talking about, ways to well and the vitality that this is attainable for anyone.
For everyone.
I mean, yeah, there's people with chronic illness and stuff like that, but you could still always improve your
It's just about being better. I tell everyone, nobody's perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's about being better. If we can make slightly better choices. If you're exhausted and tired and don't have energy, it's not because you're old. It's because you're not healthy. And that's the lie we've been sold. Oh, it's just part of aging. You know, so many, this is my other beef with primary care. And I'm not, the average primary care works their tail off and they're underpaid and overworked and they're in a system that is letting them down and beating them up and chewing them up and spitting them out. It's a thankless job. But so many primaries tell people, well, you're getting older. You're just going to have to change your lifestyle. You can't do jujitsu anymore, Chad. You're getting older. You need to be cautious. Who wants to live a life of desperation? Like, I don't want to live a life of lesser. If I would rather die at 90 jumping out of an airplane than die at 105 in a bed chronically ill.
Heck yeah. Like I went to the doctor the other day because my toes been, and I went to, and she said, well, you've broken it so many times. It's been dislocated so many times. The only thing I could do to prevent infections between the bones would be to screw it in place, but it would really like be prohibitive for jiu-jitsu. I said, can you cut it off? And she's like, yeah. So I'm going to cut it off next week. So, I mean, I'm not going to let a toe stop me from doing jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Like it's a pinky toe anyway. Like I might cut it off.
That's so wild. You're crazy, man. That's funny.
Well, I mean, I was like,
but I
love jiu-jitsu, man. It's I mean, I'd have a whatever pinky toe that doesn't even work, keep me from being healthy and doing jiu-jitsu. That's what I like mentally, but the mental health, the physical health, the social environment of jiu-jitsu, which is the things we talk about in the Resilience Show, the pillars, mind, body, spirit, social. Like I get all those things on the mats of jiu-jitsu.
I get it. Like for me, Muay Thai, like training Muay Thai, my anxiety level goes down. I sleep. It's an escape. I'm hyper-focused and I couldn't do it. I know there's no way I could train Muay Thai 5 days a week if I was not optimized. Right. There's just no way. And the other guys I see in there, anybody over the age of 40 that's in a jiu-jitsu gym all the time or in a Muay Thai gym all the time, almost all those guys are optimized. When you start talking to them and they get comfortable. Oh, yeah. But we need to destigmatize that. It shouldn't be, you aren't doing anything wrong by optimizing your health. Like this should be like on the forefront of like what we talk about. And that's where I appreciate so many of these voices that have come out and said, I'm optimized. If you see a guy in their 50s and they're shredded and in great shape and eating right and doing all those things, I promise you they're probably optimizing their hormones too and using peptides and so many of these things to fight father time, which catches up to all of us.
Yeah, enjoying life a little bit while we're in the process too. Yeah. And kind of dragging that timeline out. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to live any other way. And honestly, like when I was in my 20s, I thought 50 was what 50 looked like to me when I was in my 20s. I would never thought it's what I'm doing today. I'm still doing everything that I love to do.
It is nuts. When you look at men and women, like you watch shows from the 80s and you like my era when I grew up and I watched those shows from the 80s and I remember what my dad was at my age. It was like you're an old man, you know, and that just doesn't have to be the case. We look at even my childhood heroes like Stallone. He's still in great shape he's an old guy in great shape. Like
he's definitely optimized.
Yeah. There's a lot we can do. And through optimizing, you do preserve bone mineral density, which one of our biggest risk factors as we age is fractures. So if we can prevent bone mineral density decline, which testosterone does, and so does IGF, LR3, like the peptide that increases growth hormone, increase lean muscle mass, prevent the loss of lean muscle mass. Like, I mean, we could dump an array of stats on your listeners about the reduction in all-cause mortality, the improvement in life and the ability, if you can fall and get back up, which is crazy to think. But as you reach your 70s and 80s, a lot of people can't get up because they lack the upper body strength.
Oh, they even had that thing, right? I fall, the little alert.
Yeah,
life
the
alert,
life
right?
alerts. Yeah.
I fall and I can't get up. They had a whole industry based around it. Yeah.
It's nuts. And now we know if we optimize hormones early and often and keep you functioning, we can prevent that decline. And through preventing that decline, we can drive health span. And that's the gist of everything I'm saying is trust yourself.
Yeah.
Take the time, if you can afford it, to go find a cash pay solution in your area and at least do a workup. I promise you, it's going to be so different than anything you've ever experienced in a traditional medical practice. To do a deep dive, take the look under the hood, figure out what's going on, get proactive and preventative, and we can prevent the chronic diseases that are killing so many people.
Well, there's lots of places out there, but you have the reputation and solid reputation. I mean, Tim, Gordon, Ryan, George St. Pierre's.
Yeah, GSP's
involved.
Rogan. We helped Aaron Rodgers with his Achilles, and he went on Joe and talked about it. So
you got some,
a lot of great
really
people.
strong testimonials, and just you, where you came from and who you are as the entrepreneur who built this. I mean, just all the credibility. So where could people listening find Ways to Well and get plugged into?
Yeah, no, thank you. Ours is Ways, the number 2, Well, WELL. So Ways, WAYS, the number 2, well.com is our website. And then same thing for Instagram. It's just Ways to Well, where we're always posting update videos on some of the stuff we're working on.
And we'll have it all in our show notes. But I think a lot of stuff you and I talked about maybe geared towards men, but there's a lot for women, right? Women have tons of hormone problems and stuff like that. There's a lot of optimization that women could benefit from this as well.
A ton, yeah. And actually what's wild is I think at one point, 60% of our patient population were women.
Say that again?
60% of the Ways to Well patients until I went on Rogan, and then now it's flipped and it's 60% men, 40% women. But we have a tremendous amount of experience dialing in women hormones and women's hormone optimization as well.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to forget this. Anybody who's military, first responders, we do offer a discount that's like substantial. And it includes our pharmacy. So one of the things that makes us a little bit different is I do own the compounding pharmacy. And so your treatments front to back throughout the whole process are discounted at a military personnel discount.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
including the medications.
I'm sure that streamlines things too, right? Having your own pharmacy.
Well, the beauty is what the future with Alan is you now have Alan in your pocket. You can ask him any of your clinical questions. He'll pull from the medical record, but he can also answer any of your prescription questions, handle your refills, make sure your credit card that's on file is good to go. Everything's just drop shipped to your house. And the goal is think of like Amazon meets Uber for healthcare. It's in your pocket 24/7 as a resource.
One of the last things I'd like to ask you is our show's the Resilience Show. I believe that information is resiliency. Like the more informed you are, the more resilient you're going to be in life. But our pillars are mind, body, spirit, and social. Those pillars. The different guests that we have on, I'll talk about from different components of those. So any words of wisdom on having a resilient lifestyle that you would have for the audience?
I actually I love the name of your show, The Resilience, because I will say that the biggest thing I've seen with successful people, it's that quote from Roosevelt that success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And whether in my personal life or my business life, I heard you reference it on Sean Ryan, Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning. That book impacted me big time when I read it. And I just thought to myself, like, it's about finding purpose It's about finding community. It's about fighting for something other than yourself, fighting for, if you make life about money or things, you'll find those things. You'll find the money, you'll find the things, but you will not find purpose and happiness. And if you make it about purpose, happiness and money come with it. And it just finds a way. So I think the best way to be resilient is to find a purpose, to find something you believe in and fight like hell for that cause. And for me, I've just backed into the healthcare space and been in it so long that I've got a chip on my shoulder from all the different areas that I've seen corruption. And my purpose is to expose the truth and fight for truth and fight for what I believe in. And it's been fun. It's been fun because even when I'm losing battles, I'm focused on winning the war. And it's easy to get discouraged if you have the wrong Northern Star.
Yeah.
And I think if you have the right Northern Star and its purpose, you'll never go wrong.
And look, putting care as a priority over profit doesn't mean that companies can't make money, right? Yeah. I hope, I'm sure you are doing well as a business owner of Ways to Well, and you should be, right? Everyone has to earn a living, and these companies out there, these pharmaceutical companies and these insurance companies, they should make money. We're in a capitalistic America, and that should happen. But it's the priorities that
there's enough money. You're nailing it because there's enough money in healthcare that we have a great thriving company that employs 500 plus people, and we do really well. And we're the most cost effective in the U.S. that I'm aware of. And the goal is to make it cheaper.
Yeah.
We can do it cheaper. I just have to get bigger and drive innovation. But what's happening in this broken system is catastrophic because they've lost their Northern Star.
What you talked about,
and it's all about money.
They lost their purpose and ability to serve and put others first. And so, insurance companies, big pharma, all you CEOs out there, like I'm asking you, can you pause, take a knee for a moment, and just say, can we put care in people's health in front of profits? You can still make money. There's plenty of money to be made.
Yeah.
Right. And no one has a problem with that. But let's put people's health care first.
I love it.
Get line up with RFK. I think he has a good mission. I think he's the right person for the job. I think President Trump has given him the full autonomy to do it, and he locking arms with amazing people like you and other just people that have the right purpose and right North Star, kind of northern guiding heart principle to put care first. I think we could do it. I'm optimistic.
I am too. I think we can do it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having on. Our sponsors do as well. We have incredible sponsors. One of those being BioX, who I really want to. I'm going to keep pushing you to you and Eric to lock arms because I just think you're such incredible human beings. I don't know if you heard of BioPro. Have you heard of BioPro?
I have actually. I think these guys. I believe I have. I think they may have been at the White House with me.
Dustin's Baker, super awesome dude, and so it's essentially like old Eastern medicine. It's kind of the deer antler. The velvet action deer antler to kind of a natural alternative for HGH. So I'll give you something to check it out and see what you think. We're going to give you some Gators eyewear. We're going to give you a copy of my new book, Silent Horizons, and what everybody comes on here for. Not to see me or meet me. Everybody comes on for the Smith & Wesson. So we have Smith & Wesson and Vortex, and two incredible companies. And I think you just had breakfast with Kyle.
I did.
Kingo,
Yeah, in DC.
Yeah. Amazing human being, great friend of mine, and Seamus Terry out of Vortex. Those are just incredible people, incredible companies. But we're gonna get you to 1854 lever action. This is one of mine. This is a 44 Magnum. We'll let you pick the caliber. It'll be 44, 45, or 357. The Stealth Hunter, which we just used on the episode of Shadow Figures.
Thank you.
The Vortex Strike Eagle is the optic I have on, but I'll go through some different optics and see which one you want, depending on what you use it for. And I think you got some property up in Austin.
I'm so pumped. Yeah. I've wanted a lever action just for fun. I think they're so cool.
It's so cool. This is 8+1. And if you're going for hogs or it's a great gun because it's so small and compact just to throw in like a leather sheath inside your
truck. That's what I was thinking because there's pigs and stuff all over my property. And I'm like, man, I'll just start rolling around with a lever action in my truck.
Jump out like Quigley down under and put them down. Yeah.
It's going to be
awesome. Well, man, thanks for having you.
Thank you for having me.
God bless you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yep. And I think we're going to go out and if time still permits, we'll go out and do some shooting.
Let's do it.
So right on.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys. Till next time, stay resilient. And if you're not already subscribe, like, comment, do all the things. Look in the show notes for things related to Ways to Well and Brigham. Also, we need your support to keep this show up and running, get as much content out to you guys. The best way you could do that is to not only share this, but to go on our Patreon and join our Patreon family. There's going to be so much amazing behind the scenes content from people like experts like Brigham, shooting, self-defense, all the different things we talk about, history. We have more and more content coming on our Patreon. So please consider joining the Patreon family. It's pretty limited expense to join and support us, from $5 a month to $99 a month. Tons of different options, lots of content. So join our Patreon today. Thanks, guys. God bless. Hey, what's up, Resilient family? I am so grateful for each of you who tune in every week to hear our episodes. We have such incredible guests and topics that I am passionate about, our team's passionate about, and we could not do it without you. So we're thankful for you. We love you. We appreciate you locking arms with us to be more informed, to become a more resilient community. And I want to invite you to become a tighter part of that community by joining us on Patreon. If you go to our show notes below, you can click the link and get dialed into our Patreon and get extra content weekly. You can join for $15 a month and get behind the scenes footage, get closer access to me. I have monthly Zooms that I'll be doing with some members of the community. And so we'd love to get more involved. Again, go below in the show notes and click the link and join today.